There we go. And I'm going to share my screen. And normally, for these kinds of events, what I would do is I would say, okay, we'll give people a couple of minutes to log in. But unfortunately, or fortunately, dependent on your point of view, we've got a hell of a lot of stuff to get through. I recorded about 6.5 hours of video over the weekend, and I've tried to cram that down as small as possible so we can get as much content in here as possible. So obviously there will be a recording available after the event. If there's anything that I go through too quickly, please feel free to hit me up on Twitter or follow up on email or anything like that, and we can absolutely work through it. I used to do these sessions for VMware, and they would typically take between 4 and 6 hours. So trying to do all of this in well, an hour is super challenging. But let's see how we get on. So first things first, let's get my clicker working. There we go. An introduction to myself. So if you don't know me, my name's Kev Johnson. I'm the technical marketing manager at Runecast. I've got a bunch of certifications. I've done a whole bunch of things in my life. I used to be a consultant. I used to do tech marketing for VMware. I've had a long and storied career, but none of that is really important right now. What's important is that I know stuff about vSphere upgrades, and that's kind of what I'm going to here to try to help you out with. If you're interested in any of the stuff that I have to say, or if you want to check me out outside of work, you can find my blog at v-it.pro. You can find a podcast that I run with another colleague and some friends at opentechcast.com. And you can hit me up on Twitter as @kev_Johnson. Excuse me. So in terms of an agenda, this is fairly loose. It's fairly flexible because I've got a lot of stuff to get through. Yeah, let's go through this agenda. So what we're going to cover first is why you might want to upgrade in the first place. Now, I could spend an hour talking about all of the great new stuff that you got with vSphere 7, but I'm not going to do that because that's not what we're here for. So we'll have a bit of a summary and we'll take a look at them. Hopefully, over the course of this, you'll come across some things whereby you'll discover why planning is actually really important. And yeah, I might be able to squeeze some horror stories in there. Talk about hardware support. Hardware support is really important, especially when going from 6 or whatever you've got. If you're jumping up to vSphere 7 for the first time, there's a lot of stuff that just won't work anymore. And I'll explain more about that as we get there. What you can do if your hardware isn't supported. So that doesn't mean you can't get some of the benefits of vSphere 7. We'll cover that in a slide shortly. We need to check out whether our environment is healthy before we get started, and some tools that you can use to do that. We'll talk about the importance of interoperability, both VMware products and also third parties. And then the vast majority of this is going to be about the actual upgrade process itself. So there's lots and lots and lots of stuff to get through, and some of the videos are kind of really speeded up. So hopefully I've kept the relevant points in there. The video will be available if you want to refer to them afterwards. And I've also got the videos. So if somebody needs them, hit me up on Twitter. I'll be happy to share them. And finally, hopefully, we'll have time for some questions and answers. So actually, before we start talking about vSphere 7, let's do the poll. So what I'm interested in is what version of vSphere you're actually looking to upgrade from at this specific point in time. This is just my curiosity. I'm not going to try to sell you anything or anything like that. I just, it's always interesting to see where people are. And I should actually have put an option in there for, yeah, we're still running ESX4 or something like that, because there's definitely people out there still doing that. Let's give this another few seconds for the poll. We've got lots of answers in already. Oh, that's better. I had my first COVID jab at the weekend. I'm still recovering a little bit, so I'm drinking lots and lots of herbal tea. So yeah, looks like we've got pretty much all the votes in that we're going to get. I'll give it another 15 seconds, so you've had a minute to vote, but we've got 67% of attendees have voted so far. And it looks like most people are upgrading from either 6.5 or 6.7. There's a whole bunch of you that are running vSphere 7 already. So vSphere 7 to 7 Update 2 is a much easier upgrade. But for those folks, we've got some folks in here that are way back with vSphere 5 and 5.1. You're going to have some challenges, I'm afraid, but we'll see what we can do to help. Okay, let's end that poll. We're about there now. Thank you. I see Andy Hancock there. I know Andy's been having problems with with the most recent patch to update 2A. So let's see if we might be able to figure something out around that as well. So that's kind of our agenda. Moving on from that, my clicker stopped working. Let's try that one again. There we go. I can't work without this thing. So let's have a quick chat about vSphere 7. So reasons you might want to upgrade. Probably the biggest thing, which most people will have heard of, is the whole Tanzu story. So the whole idea that you can then run Kubernetes workloads natively on vSphere. And Tanzu as in and of itself is kind of a big umbrella term for all of these modern applications tools. But the vast majority of people, when they say Tanzu, they mean Tanzu Kubernetes Grid. So, just being able to run that stuff on vSphere is a really big reason to look at vSphere 7. There's improvements to the developer center. So Tanzu is kind of all about enabling developers. If you're more of an infrastructure admin sort of person, but you're looking at developing automation and things like that, then you might want to have a look at the developer center. There's some improvements here, some new APIs and code capture. So if you're a terrible coder like me, you don't actually have to be able to write code. What you can do is there's a feature within there called code capture. You turn it on, you do the thing that you're trying to do within the user interface. And then once you've done that, you turn it off and it spits out some code for you. So you can take that, and historically it used to spit out PowerCLI. And now there's also options for Python, for JavaScript. So you can take that and run it in vRealize Orchestrator, for example, and also Go, which is kind of important for the Kubernetes world. There's a lot of improvements in vSphere Lifecycle Manager. So the thing that used to be called vSphere Update Manager is now everything that was old is new again. So Update Manager becomes Lifecycle Manager, but under the hood, there's a whole new set of tooling to manage the lifecycle of your clusters. And this can also cover things like upgrading your firmware, upgrading your BIOS, all of these kinds of things as well. So it can make your life significantly easier. It also takes the old model of from kind of this imperative model where you tell it what order to do things, to move to a more declarative model. So instead of saying install this patch, reboot, install this patch, you just say, I want my cluster to look like this, and Lifecycle Manager takes care of the rest. So there's that. Improvements in certificate management. Certificates have been a horror story for vSphere for a number of years now. I'm really glad that I'm on the outside and I can say that. But yeah, there's been challenges. It gets better every time. So there's improvements to certificate management, including some APIs there. And identity federation. So for a long time, people have wanted to be able to log in using ADFS, and that kind of really enables things like two-factor authentication and things like that. Finally, vSphere Trust Authority. I say finally, that's finally for this screen. This is, I think, is going to be a bigger thing over the coming years, or probably over the next year or two. Yeah, it's worth spending some time looking into. I don't unfortunately have a lot of time to go into it right now, but believe me, if you're dealing with highly regulated industries, if you're dealing with high security environments, Trust Authority is something you're going to want to know about. Moving on to update 2, some of the other things in here. So there's improvements to vMotion, giving you vMotion auto scaling so that you can really take advantage of these new higher bandwidth network cards, things like that. There's the Virtual Trusted Platform module, which is now available for Linux virtual machines. It was previously only available for Windows. You could hack around and tell vSphere you were deploying a Windows machine, and you get the VTPM, and then good luck getting it working. It's now in there for Linux. New GPUs, new CPUs, all of these new accelerators and all of that kind of stuff. You're going to need the newest versions of vSphere for that. Excuse me. The native key provider. So the native key provider is something that was kind of going on. It's been going on for a little while now. And a lot of people want to be able to take advantage of vSphere encryption and vSAN encryption and all of these kind of encryption things to make their lives more secure. But the challenge is you need to have a key management service, and that key management service must be it should be as available as DNS. And those KMS servers are typically not the cheapest things, and in some cases, they're very complex to set up. So the whole idea of the native key provider was to really lower that barrier of entry to encryption. I would probably say, it's not as awesome as something like you might get from someone like HighTrust, but it's definitely worth looking into. And if all you're doing is messing around in a lab, yeah, it's an absolute no-brainer. Give it a shot. There's suspend to memory. So if you've got workloads that you could actually just basically pause while you're patching your host and then unpause them. Suspend to memory requires quick boot. So if you don't have quick boot enabled hardware, you can't use suspend to memory. But it's really useful for those workloads, maybe out in, maybe really out in the edge, whereby you might only have one single host, and you can't really tolerate shutting down all of those workloads in order to patch the host, but you still want to be able to patch the host. So suspend to memory's got a really good use case there. And finally, the VMware Tools Guest Store. So this is a thing that I demonstrated at VMworld 2.5 years ago. The whole idea with Guest Store is that we can use the capabilities that already exist within vSphere to deploy packages into an operating system without necessarily needing a network card enabled, for example. So the initial use case for this is to just update VMware Tools. But longer term, you're going to be able to use this for all kinds of stuff as well. Think about it as a way to connect virtual machines up to content libraries. That's probably the easiest way to look at it. Okay, so why is planning important? I imagine a few people here might have, you might have watched Roadrunner as a child, and I always loved the amount of effort that Wile E. Coyote would put into these plans to compromise Roadrunner. He'd like drop in an anvil on, or he'd paint a cave on a wall, and then Roadrunner would run into it, and it would actually be a cave. Then he'd do it, and it would just be painted onto a rock face. So that was always good fun to me. I always like to see plans go awry, but I've spent a lot of time as a consultant, as an architect, and I know that failing to plan really is planning to fail. That has been attributed to a number of people. I think Benjamin Franklin is probably the first person you hit on Google. Excuse me. So the first thing we need to do is we need to really look at the documentation. There's a whole raft of documentation out there. So if we start with the release notes, whenever there's a new version, please read the release notes. They are very, very verbose. They will tell you bugs that are fixed. They will tell you problems that you might run into. So often because when you look at VMware environments, vSphere is kind of at the core, but there are many, many, many other programs and many, many other packages that touch on vSphere. And so in some cases, you might want to hold off that upgrade because maybe NSX isn't supported with that release, for example. These things are called out in the release notes, so please do read them. The vSphere upgrade docs, again, they're really, really good documents. They will give you all of the information that you need. Again, they can take a little bit of time to read through, but it's well worth spending that time up front. Otherwise, you'll spend the time in the end anyway. Interoperability matrices, so these are important as well, and I've got a slide on this later. So interop is basically how things plug together. So if you have this product and this product and this product and this product, you have to make sure that they all work with each other. That's the interoperability, so please consult those. Check your third-party software, especially backup software. So backup software is that one thing everybody kind of forgets about backup software because backups are not sexy. Backups never have been sexy, they never will be sexy. The only time people care about backups is when they need to be able to recover. So if you don't check your backup software and you upgrade and then you find, I'm in a bit of awkward position because I can't actually recover my workloads, that's the kind of thing you need to be looking at. But it's not just backup software. Anything that touches vSphere, you need to make sure is going to work. Great question there from Petra. And also, hi. So in order to use suspend to memory, you need to have hardware that is quick boot enabled. So there's a limited selection of hardware it goes through extra validation by the vendors and also by VMware to validate that everything's going to work. And that's the case that you need to check that in terms of suspend to memory. Once you've got quick boot enabled hardware, you can use suspend to memory. But suspend to memory is only exposed through Lifecycle Manager as well. So that means you can only use it if you upgrade your clusters to use Lifecycle Manager rather than the legacy baselines model. The HCL, I'll touch on that in a moment. The product documentation, the VMware documentation has become significantly better over the years. The docs platform is much better. You can subscribe to documentation about specific packages and things like that. And when there's an update, you'll get notifications. All of these things are really, really good. One other cool thing about the product documentation that not a lot of people know is that you can actually submit feedback through it as well. So if you think something is written in a confusing manner, please go to the website, submit that feedback. It will go back to the technical writing team. They can then correct that for you. I do this all the time. I used to do it internally as well. And it's lots of people complain about documentation being bad, but unless you do something about it, grumbling on Twitter doesn't help. It does make you feel better, I can guarantee you that, but submit that bug report. And finally, there's this thing called the core. So VMware, so the vSphere team used to have vSphere Central, and all of the different teams had their own separate areas, and they've kind of brought them all together so you can get all of the storage, all of the core vSphere, all of the Cloud Foundation. It's all there at the core in the Cloud Platform Tech Zone there. So all that documentation you need should be in there, including a whole bunch of stuff that helps you walk through vSphere upgrades. And this is something I had a couple of emails about from people who registered for the webinar today, so I thought it was worth calling out. There were some changes to core storage required for vSphere, so actually the media that you install to, because of, well, if we consider what's happened over the past few years, you would typically have you would have an image and you would install that image, and you might install a couple of VIBs, some extra drivers and things like that. But we've got things like NSX now, and the NSX VIB is pretty chunky. You've got a bigger VMware tools installers. There's all kinds of other things that you need to be able to fit into your installation there. So the requirement is just that the boot banks get bigger. On top of that, there have been some changes here around the locker area, the core dump area, all of these kinds of things. Now, typically, you're going to redirect these. If you're installing to a USB key or to an SD card, you're going to redirect these to somewhere else, somewhere that's on a network. You can't redirect them to vSAN, for example. But yeah, you typically install, you'll push them somewhere else. And because of this, what's happened is if you kind of ignore the documentation, this thing kind of happens. I say ignore the documentation. To be clear, at launch, the documentation could have been clearer. And again, I think people submitted change requests in documentation, and this got fixed. But what happens now is if you install to an SD card or you install to a USB key, even if you're doing the redirecting, you're still going to burn that device out very, very quickly. Even if you spend the extra money on high resiliency SD cards. So my advice to you would be, if you're using SD cards or USB keys, please reconsider something like BOS cards, or just put an SSD in the server. Those kinds of devices have become much, much cheaper over the years. So as you look to do a major upgrade from vSphere 5 or 6 to vSphere 7, then this is the perfect opportunity to fix your storage problem there. Hopefully no one's seen one of these recently. Oh, crikey, we're getting tight on time already. So this is a purple screen of death, although it's more of a kind of magenta screen of death, if you ask me. There are many, many causes of this, but the number one cause of purple screens of death, in my experience anyway, is people not following the hardware compatibility list or the VMware compatibility guide. So especially if we're looking at I/O devices, so network cards, host bus adapters, fiber channel cards, all of those kinds of things. If you consider those, we have to validate every single thing there. We have to validate the firmware, the drivers. We have to make sure the hardware works. We need to make sure that the PCI slots are fast enough for the cards to run and all of these things. But we have to validate every single server. We have to validate the vendor ID, device ID, sub-vendor ID, all of these things. And that takes a lot of time, especially if you've got a very large environment. Now, you might think that, oh, well, we bought 100 of these servers from Dell, so they're all going to be the same. And I say good luck to you on that one, sir, because that's not likely to be the case. And the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, we need to think about drivers. So in earlier versions of vSphere, there was this concept of VMK Linux drivers. So they were kind of Linux-like drivers that could be executed by the ESXi operating system, by VM kernel. And those go away as of vSphere 7. So that option goes away. Now, if you're running your home lab and you've got some Realtek network cards, for example, as soon as you upgrade to vSphere 7, you have no network cards. They won't work. So you need to make sure you have native inbox or third-party drivers there. So validating all that stuff is hard. It takes a lot of work. And, we all like a Simpsons meme. Couldn't it be easier? So I'm going to show you in a moment how Runecast Analyzer can really help you to analyze and, to see all of that stuff across your estate. It's going to be very, very quick, and it's not going to be a sales pitch, I guarantee you. So the other thing to bear in mind is if your hardware isn't compatible, vCenter can always run N-2 versions of ESXi. So if you're running vSphere 7, you're fine with running ESXi 6.5. That's going to work. I would recommend you do that because you get a lot of the benefits of running that newer version of vCenter, but you're still tied with the old hardware. And if you can't upgrade your ESXi hosts, then the challenge that you have there is you don't get access to all of the new bells and whistles. So things like BitFusion, things like the newer versions of vSAN, new CPUs, new VM compatibility versions. If you want that latest VM compatibility version 19, you need to be running the latest version of ESXi. So sometimes there's a bit of a stopgap and you have to wait because you have to organize budget for ESXi hosts and things. But there's options for you there. You don't have to be running the same version of vCenter. So please, please, please get rid of that whole the vSphere web client. You don't need that stuff anymore. You don't need the hacky workarounds to get Flash to work. And also health checks. And this is as important now as it was when I used this image last year for the exact same thing. COVID has made the world crazy. And, health is really important all across the board. It's a tenuous link, but the health of your environment before you even consider an upgrade, please, 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 please make sure you find any problems in the environment and fix them first. Because if you go ahead and upgrade and you've got problems, trying to unpick what caused those problems is not fun. So some tools that you can use to validate the health of your environment. Runecast Analyzer, of course, I'm going to say that because I've got a Runecast shirt on. There we go. Skyline Advisor. I bet you never thought you'd see the day when someone from Runecast was saying, you could use Skyline Advisor to do a thing, but it's a tool that you've got available to you. So, use it if you've got it. There's RV Tools is out there. RV Tools is great for picking up configuration details. And so, if something goes wrong, you've got a way to kind of go, okay, well, this is how it was before we started. So RV Tools is free, costs you nothing. You might need to give them your email address, I'm not sure. If you're a VMware professional services customer or a partner, then you might be able to leverage the VMware Health Check. That's available through PSO or through partners. And again, that may be free, it may be chargeable, gives you a lot of data, some of which might be hard to digest, but that's often down to the partners and PSO to make it easier to consume. Finally, a shout out to Alan Renouf, whose house burned down last year. He was a big inspiration to me. He's still fine. He's doing great. So he's still at VMware. So he wrote the original vCheck script, which is a PowerCLI script that has hundreds and hundreds of plugins available now. So you can execute this, run it on a daily basis, have it logged to your help desk or whatever, and they can absolutely help out with, it can help you identify problems. Yeah, just another quick check in the chat. There's SD card corruption. Yeah, again, I honestly cannot recommend SD cards in production anymore. I've seen too many horror stories, especially because they often sell you them with like a dual SD card adapter and tell you it's RAID 1, but good luck with just recovering that. It always involves a reinstall. Just back on this, make sure before you start you take backups. And we're not just talking about taking snapshots, because as we all know, snapshots are completely acceptable backups. There's the file-based backup tool, which is built into the VCSA. So if you're already on VCSA, make sure you use that. The image and the database backup, if you're using vCenter Server on Windows, take an image of the server, take a database backup of the database, so you can recover that if there's any problems. There's an ESXi firmware backup. This is a little bit belt and braces and is probably overkill for most people. But if you really, really want to make sure that you are covering absolutely everything, you can use PowerCLI to take a copy of the configuration of ESXi on your host. And if there's a problem, you can reinstall ESXi and just spit that firmware back onto that host. Finally, make sure you take a backup of the virtual distributed switch before you make any changes. I'll cover that a little bit later. So, snapshots. I was joking about snapshots being backups. They're absolutely not backups. If you use snapshots as backups, one day, and I imagine pretty soon, it will bite you. So learn from the people who've made those mistakes, including myself. Snapshots are not backups. They're a great way to recover quickly, but don't rely on them. And on that note, let's just have a quick look at, no, let's go back to that slide. Let's go back to that slide. There we go. Let's just have a quick look at Runecast Analyzer. Let's see which way. Where are we? Which screen? Oh no, I've lost my Chrome window. There we go. Okay, so Runecast Analyzer. This is a great tool that you can use. There's a 14-day trial available, so you can just download it, deploy it in your lab or wherever, and we'll point out how many problems you've got. You won't see the fixes for everything because we all need paying, because we need to live in our solid gold houses. We've all got pets to feed and things like that. So we can identify all of these problems very quickly. We can have a look into the sources of these things. We can help with security and compliance and all of the rest of that stuff, but we're not interested in that right now. But if we look at the config KB, so these are all the problems that we've got in our environment. We've got a problem with a receive-side scaling plugin cleanup engine. That is a known issue affecting ESXi 6.7. So if we have a look here, we can see there's the entire KB, and what we need to do is we need to install ESXi 6.7 update 2 to fix it. So that's all fine. We can work through all of those. We can fix them in advance of the problems, because remember, do that stuff before you do the upgrade. In terms of hardware, so again, you could go and, there's a VMware Fling that might help you pull from specific vCenter servers the details of each host, or you could point Runecast Analyzer to your environment and we can see immediately where we've got problems. So we fix these problems up front, and then we go, okay, we want to upgrade to 7 update 2. What other problems have we got? And then we can explore these and see, yeah, okay, we've got lots of problems. We've got a problem with the BIOS here. We've got a problem with this IO device here. So we've got a problem. It looks like, yeah, we need to upgrade this firmware. This firmware is 21.3.5, which is supported for the version of vSphere we're running, but we need 23.14.06 in order to be supported. So that is your very, very quick look at Runecast Analyzer. And let's jump back to the slides. Let's get rid of. I was joking around before we started, saying that there's a new beta version of Mac OS available. I got the notification about an hour ago, and I half considered installing it just for fun. But obviously, no, you don't do that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's Runecast Analyzer. It's a tool that you can use to really help to identify problems and deal with them before they cause you a pain in the backside, basically. So moving on from there, I mentioned interoperability earlier. So there's a new website for this now, interopmatrix.vmware.com. If you go to that website, you can punch in all the different products you've got, and it will show you how they work in terms of interoperability. You can then export that to CSV or print it out if that's what you want to do, because people love printing stuff out still, right? I've got a printer down here, and I don't think I've used it in 3 years. It's yeah, it feels like a waste of plastic, but at the same time, I don't want to toss it in the sea because that would be really bad. And also, the moment that I do that, I'll need to print something again. The second thing that this page can really help with is the upgrade path. So kind of figuring out how you get from where you are. So for those folks who are on 5, 5.1, 5.5, and 6, you cannot go straight to vSphere 7. You have to kind of do this staggered step approach whereby you might upgrade from 5 to 5.5 to 6.0 to 6.7 to 7 or something like that. And the interop matrix will show you where you've got those problems. So please consult these documents. Right, we're halfway in. We've got 22 minutes of video to get through. So let's crack on. So the upgrade process, it's much simpler once you're actually going to vSphere 7, because we've got rid of this whole concept of the external platform services controller. So that was kind of in, out, and now it's gone. So even if you have that external PSC, you can kind of almost ignore it as part of this process because you're not going to upgrade it. There's no upgrading that, then vCenter. You just upgrade vCenter and away you go. So first things first, we need to upgrade all vCenter servers within our single sign-on domain. So if we have enhanced link mode, we need to upgrade all of the vCenter servers in that SSO domain before we do anything with the ESXi host, for example. We then move on to ESXi. And some people will tell you that that is a vSphere upgrade completed, but there's a bunch of other stuff that you might want to do as well. You might want to upgrade VMware tools. VMware tools is important. It's got lots and lots of drivers and all kinds of other things. If you want to use the guest store, you need to have VMware tools. VM compatibility is also important as well. So you've probably got some workloads out there that are running on older versions of the VM compatibility. I see a lot of security appliances that run at version 8. And the problem is a couple of years ago, there was this little thing called Spectre and its friend Meltdown. And it's not possible for anything that's running a lower version of VM compatibility than version 9 to get the CPU microcode fixed. So if you choose to run those older versions, you're running at risk of those kinds of side channel attacks. Incidentally, if you're running virtual appliances, don't just go and upgrade the virtual hardware. Please consult with the vendor first, but lean on them really heavily. We're now at version 19 of VM compatibility, which gives you some great options for monster VMs and things like that. Storage, so there's VMFS for block storage and vSAN there for object storage. I'll show you how to deal with those as well. And finally, the vSphere distributed switch. There's a new version in 7 update 2. Excuse me, something really on my chest today. So this is my scribbled almost whiteboard of the architecture that I'm going to show you we're going to upgrade. So we've got 2 sites. We've got London and Paris. London is our production site. Paris is our disaster recovery site. So in London, we've got a platform services controller and we've got a vCenter server. They're both running 6.7, but because I'm a sucker for punishment, they're running on Windows. I also have an external update manager server, which is also running on Windows. And then finally, we've got some ESXi hosts that are running 6.7 because it's production. And yeah, we should be keeping these things up to date. Over in the Paris site, we also have another platform services controller. So again, Windows running the same version because that's how we roll. And another vCenter server, again, running Windows because somebody made bad decisions in the past life. And finally, we've got some ESXi hosts. Now, these ESXi hosts are slightly challenging because they're running the general availability version of 6.5. And there's a bug. There's a certificate that was installed on the ESXi host at 6.5 that is used to validate the identity of the update manager server. And if you try to take an ESXi 6.5 host and connect it to a vSphere 7 update manager or lifecycle manager server, it can't verify the identity. So we have to do manual upgrades on those, which makes me a little bit sick. But there we go. So what we're aiming for, we're going to leave those platform services controllers as they are. We're not going to bother upgrading them. Good question there. Is it mandatory in vSphere 7 to separate the platform services controller? You have no option. You cannot deploy a vSphere 7 platform services controller. The only topology that's supported is the embedded topology. So what we're going to do is we're going to deploy a new appliance for each site. We'll do them one at a time. vCenter server appliance running 7 update 2A. That will be then converged as part of that process. So it will suck all of the brains out of that PSC into the embedded PSC. And then we'll do the same thing over in the Paris site. All of the data that comes out of the VUM server as well, that all gets sucked into the vSphere 7 vCenter server appliance. And then we'll upgrade the hosts to 7 update 2A, because why not? So once we've done that, we're going to get rid of, you can see how I did these slides now. Question about auto deploy. There's not really any changes to auto deploy apart from the fact that there is some integration with auto deploy and what you get with lifecycle manager. So if you're going to use auto deploy to deploy a host and that host is targeted for a lifecycle manager cluster, the relevant image will automatically be selected and applied to that as part of the auto deploy process. Just back to this, so the target architecture, we're going to get rid of that update manager server. We're going to get rid of that platform services controller. We go back to the platform services controller and get rid of that platform services controller. And then we end up with a much more simple architecture with 2 vCenter servers and a bunch of ESXi hosts. So here's where we get started. There we go. So we can see we've got these 2 vCenter servers running in linked mode, one in Paris, one in, there we go, if you're using vSphere to deploy only state, oh, that is a great point there, actually, Jatin. So yeah, so if you're using Lifecycle Manager at all, Lifecycle Manager only supports stateful deploys. So we can see, just verifying the ESXi 6.5 boxes. So here's our different Windows virtual machines. We're going to go to the Update Manager server. We're going to mount our installation media. And then from here, we're going to launch the migration assistant. We need to run this on each Windows server that we're going to be dealing with as part of the upgrade. You used to have to do this on the PSC as well. So there we go, the migration assistant is running. We're going to go up to the first vCenter server as well. So this is the VC, not the platform services controller. And we're just going to run through this. There's a couple more questions coming in. I'm going to deal with them as we get to the end, because otherwise we're going to run out of time before we get there. So now we can see we have an external PSC vCenter server, which is tiny, and we're going to go to a vCenter server appliance 7 with an embedded PSC. And now from my jump box, not from the vCenter that we're about to upgrade, we're going to launch the installer. You can do this from the CLI as well, if you're a CLI nerd. There's a lot of really good reasons to do it from the CLI. It's really good. You can build JSON files to deploy all of this stuff. Now we could do an install or an upgrade. Upgrade is only if you're upgrading from an appliance to an appliance. We're doing a migrate because we're going from Windows to appliance. And we can see here we're going to converge the PSC. Here's the detail about the deprecation of the external PSC for, I forget who it was who asked the question about the external PSC. It was deprecated a long time ago, and now it's being removed. So we have to walk through this wizard. This is the source vCenter server that we're going to connect to, and we need the single sign-on password for that. We should probably validate this SHA-1 thumbprint. So this is a certificate that we're running from the migration assistant. So we can now validate that against the thumbprint that's displayed in the migration assistant. So we know that's all good. Click yes to this, and this is the bit where you'll really see how much I speeded this up. I've not spoken this quickly in a long time. This is my management vCenter, so I'm just deploying the new appliance into the management vCenter because I'm using Nested Labs to demonstrate all of this. Oh, I've still got the Project Pacific folder in there. I should get rid of that. I'm going to deploy it into my compute cluster. And we'll just give it a name. So what I'm going to do here, I can't give it the same VM name as the existing one because that virtual machine already exists. So this is going to be RC VCSA01 rather than RC VC01. I'll just give the appliance a new root password. So this doesn't have to be the same as the admin password on your Windows box, for example. And then we need to select a deployment size. Now, bear in mind that this is going to take some values from your source. So if this is a Windows box, it's going to make some assumptions based on the amount of memory, the number of CPUs, how much storage is presented. And then here, I just need to now select the network that I'm going to deploy to. And I'll give it a temporary IP address. So this IP address, I mean, ideally, if I'm doing this, I would recommend that you deploy this to the same port group as the source vCenter server. It's not mandatory, but you do need to have network connectivity. But bear in mind that once this is completed, what's going to happen is the source vCenter server will be shut down, and this vCenter server will be rebooted. And when it comes back up, it will have the same IP address, the same DNS, the same netmask, all the rest of that stuff as that source vCenter server. So if it's not in the same VLAN or the same subnet, then you're going to have problems. Just a bunch of stuff that got deprecated. We've already talked about the external PSC. It tells us that we're going to need to decommission the PSC, and then also it's mentioning about some plugins. So we've got a Runecast plugin. I already know that this plugin is going to be valid with vSphere 7, so no problems there. But what I will have to do is just go through some setup in order to make sure that's going to work again. I think we need a new API token because it's a new server. Great question in there from Pietro. When you're deploying a vCenter server, if you're deploying it to a vSphere distributed switch, a really good tip there is make sure you deploy it to an ephemeral port group. If you do not deploy to an ephemeral port group, you're going to have a really bad day when it comes to recovering anything from backup, because vCenter is the control plane for that distributed port, for that distributed switch. And here we go. We can see the pre-checks are running. This is on the vCenter server, and then it says we're shutting down, all good to go. Yeah, I've made the same mistake, Pietro. So good to. It's always like trying to get all of the tips into these things is just so difficult, just because of the time. So there we go. It says after successful convergence upgrade, the external PSC cannot be used, so we need to decommission it. So I'll walk through that in a video very shortly. And also, we disable TLS 1.0 and 1.1 because they're insecure protocols. You should always use TLS 1.2 once you get to this point. So if you have proxies and things like that, you might need to do some work around that. So just get logged in again, and we're going to have a look at what things look like. There we go. What I'm doing on this video. Nearly there. Ooh, tea in the eye, always good fun. So there we can see that we've got a problem. If we log into the Paris vCenter, we can see that we had a compatibility problem because it's a higher version now in London. Just clean that tea out of my eye. There we go. Professional tips there. Don't put tea in your eye. We can see that the environment's in mixed mode, and mixed mode is only supported during the upgrade process. So please make sure you fix that. You can see it again there as well. And in fact, yeah, let's just click on to the next video. Let's see if we can save a few seconds. This is what we see. We have the vCenter server that is incompatible if we log in through Paris. So we're going to want to make sure we upgrade the Paris VC as well. Now, I've sped this up a lot more because it's basically the same process. The only difference is when we select the option for convergence, instead of saying it's the first one in the topology, we have to point it back at the newly converged VCO1. So let's just walk through this. Hopefully that noise out there isn't too disturbing. It would appear that the neighborhood have just decided to get their lawnmowers out. So there we go. We're going to do all of this stuff again. We're going from an external. We can also see we've got an embedded vSphere update manager on this server as well. You get an embedded VOM or an embedded lifecycle manager when you complete that upgrade. Again, we're going to migrate. Oh no, I didn't mean to click that. Let's see if we can jump to the relevant point here. Right. Okay, so we've completed the deployment of this vCenter. Sorry, I clicked the button too quickly. So we go on to the phase 2. We see all of this stuff here. IWA is deprecated and will be removed, etc., etc. And this is where the difference is. We say a subsequent vCenter server, and we key in the original vCenter server, so the RCVCO1, not the PSCs. And then we run through the rest of this in exactly the same way. We select the relevant migration data, yada, yada, yada. We've taken a backup. If we haven't taken a backup, we're going to have problems if we need to recover potentially. It's going to go through all of this, and we can see it's collecting all of that stuff. That's being shut down now. So we're now down to just an update manager and 2 Windows PSCs that are still up and running. And we can shut down the update manager pretty much immediately afterwards. The PSCs we'll do as part of the next video. Okay, so VTO2 has finished upgrading. There we go, we log in and we validate that everything's working. Now, again, I'm going to skip ahead because we want to make sure we cover everything. But at this point, I would urge you to stop. It's hammer time. What you're going to find happens when you go do that upgrade, if you're going from 6.5 or 6.7 up to vSphere 7, there's a whole bunch of new stuff in the UI, and you're likely to see weird things happen like this. Now, this isn't an actual problem with vSphere. It's all stuff that's cached in your web browser. So just go ahead and clear your web browser cache, and you'll save yourself a lot of troubleshooting time just by doing that. If you do that before you start raising support tickets and things, you'll have a much happier life. So that's that. We're going to decommission some external PSCs now. What can you tell me about no healthy upstream? No healthy upstream is typically, let me click this off. This is just some CLI. So I'm going to SSH into the new first VCSA, and I'm going to run a tool called CMSSO util to decommission those two external platform services controllers. So people can watch that and see how bad I am at typing under pressure. I'll answer that question from Adrian there. So yeah, what can you tell me about no healthy upstream? No healthy upstream is caused by a number of things. Often it's just because services haven't completed starting, but sometimes, if you get no healthy upstream for a long time, it's usually because something has gone amiss. It could be DNS is out of whack. It could be you've got any number of problems in the environment. So no healthy upstream as an error message is not a particularly helpful error message when it comes to troubleshooting. You need to really get into the upgrade logs and things like that. But that no healthy upstream that you saw there was just because the services hadn't finished starting. So I just refreshed the browser. There's no magic going on under the hood there. So we can see here I'm now decommissioning the second external platform services controller. Something to bear in mind when you do this is that the vCenter server that you run it from will restart the services. So there may be potential downtime to the admins who are using vCenter essentially. And now it's done both of those. Let's see if we can get logged in. And we're logged in. So I'm just going to say, yes, we know that this is correct. And I promise you, these are all good. But again, I've not left myself enough time by the looks of things. Let's see. In fact, we'll see. So what we're going to see here is we only have two vCenter servers, and they will be embedded. There we go. We've got rid of the external PSCs. Another important tip for that, before you get rid of those PSCs, please read the KB for it. And also, please make sure you shut those external PSCs down, because if you don't, you're going to have problems. Upgrading ESXi hosts. So we've got a couple of steps here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use baselines, because we can't convert a cluster to Lifecycle Manager to use images until those hosts are running vSphere 7. So, also, yeah, we've got these new vCenter servers. Please set up a file-based backup if you haven't already done so. I'm not going to show you how to do this. You just need a server to send that to. But yeah, so here we're running ESXi 6.7. So we're going to configure these to be upgraded to 7 updates. In fact, we're going to upgrade them to 7. Then we'll flip to Lifecycle Manager. We'll use Lifecycle Manager to upgrade to 7 update 2A. And then those other ones are using 6.5. So we can have a look at all of that stuff. In fact, let's see if I can skip ahead a little bit on this. In fact, no, let's not. If this runs over, I am so sorry, but I will do my best to get some questions in at the end. So we can't convert to Lifecycle Manager yet because the hosts need to be at vSphere 7. So we need to import our ESXi 7 image here. Okay. This is going to take a few seconds. And again, if you do this in real time, all of this process takes a long time. So don't think that you can go through it Speedy Gonzalez. So yeah, we have that. We can see in here, here's a list of all of the components that are inside that image. So we're going to create a new baseline. So this is the exact same way as we would if we were using the old version VUM. So we're going to call this an upgrade to 7GA. Hit next. And finish. So we've created a new baseline. We've attached that image to the baseline, and we're going to attach that baseline to this cluster. And again, this is just like you used to do it before. So we're going to attach this upgrade to 7 general availability, and we're going to hit check compliance. So compliance check is completed. We can now see that we are non-compliant there. So if we select that, we're going to hit remediate. It's an upgrade baseline. We're non-compliant. Remediation pre-check is all good. We need to accept a new end user license agreement because it's a new major version of vSphere. Something else to bear in mind is when you do this, once you upgrade to vSphere 7 from 6, you're going to need a new license. So you need to go to VMware Customer Connect or myvmware.com and you'll need to upgrade your licenses and key them in here. You'll be in trial mode until you do that. So here we could turn quick boot on if we had hosts that were capable. In fact, they are capable because they're nested hosts, but that's that. So we can see our first host has gone down. It's come back up. That's now running vSphere 7. This is how quick I am. vSphere said, so we'll do the other host. So this is it. It's running 6.7. It's shutting down. It comes back up. It's running vSphere 7. So again, these are just nested ESXi hosts. So that's just an easy way for me to show you that. And then we'll move on to, there we go, we're exiting maintenance mode. Let's see if we can make this a bit quicker as well. And then we have these other ones down here. So if you try to do the upgrade from 6.5 to 7, in fact, let's do this. So we need to go to the other vCenter server because the vCenter server is, sorry, the update manager server, the lifecycle manager server is part of vCenter now. We're going to install the update 2A image and try and upgrade that there. And we're going to have problems. So we're going to create a new baseline. Again, baselines are per lifecycle manager server. This is exhausting, isn't it? It's good fun though. So again, we have the details of everything that's in the image. And we're going to now apply that cluster. We're going to apply that image, that baseline to this cluster. So upgrade to 7 update 2A, attach that. We're now going to run a compliance check. And I'll see if I can pause it at the very moment where we have our problem, because otherwise, where's my mouse gone? Okay, so we're doing the scan, and there we go. Just there, it says cannot deploy host upgrade agent ensure the vSphere lifecycle manager is officially signed, check network connectivity, etc., etc. And it's because the host cannot validate, it can't verify the identity of lifecycle manager. So what we're going to do, I'm going to jump onto the next slide, save ourselves maybe 40 seconds. We're going to do an ISO upgrade. So we're going to mount the ISO on each of our hosts, and we're going to do a manual upgrade. Now, you don't want to do this if at all possible. So if that's the case, if you're running 6.5, please make sure you upgrade them to at least 6.5 update 2. Once you've got that update 2 in there, then you'll be able to do that. You'll be able to upgrade using Lifecycle Manager. So yeah, there we go. What we're going to do, we're just going to put a host into maintenance mode because we need to make sure we don't have any VMs running on it. The vSAN is all good. And once it's in maintenance mode, we'll connect to the console. There we go. This is going to be super quick. Connect in there. We're just now going to go restart. It's going to shut down, and we'll run through a manual upgrade process. You can also build scripts to do this. But trust me, if you have the option, if you're going from 6.5, then it's much, much easier to just patch that host to 6.5 update 2 before you do the upgrades. You'll just save yourself a lot of this kind of stuff. So we're going to do the upgrade, yada, yada, yada. My phone's going crazy today. There we go. That's as much as we're going to see of that. Upgrading VMware tools and VM compatibility. If you're going to do the latter, please do VMware tools first, because otherwise sometimes bad things happen. So upgrading VMware tools, everyone's done this before. You right click on the VM, you've got the option of automatic upgrade or interactive upgrade. If you're running Linux boxes, use OpenVM tools, and that makes it much easier. You can just have your Linux team run those upgrades using whatever orchestration tools they're using, if they're using Ansible or Satellite, or whatever tooling they have. Upgrading VM compatibility is really easy. You right click a virtual machine, and again, you could do many of these. You can do it with Power CLI. I'm just showing you, the quickest way that I could to do just a single VM. So here we're going to right click it. We can see we're running version 13, and once we right click it, go on right click it, you can do it. What was I thinking? So we're going to go to compatibility, schedule VM compatibility upgrade, and then once we go through this, in order to do this upgrade, the VM has to be powered off and back on again. So this is kind of cool because what it can capture a reboot. So if you're going to do the reboot, it will actually intercept that reboot, it will shut it down, and it will power it back up again to do that upgrade. That's a cool little feature. There's a Power CLI command that you can use to do that for VMs if you have other reasons for needing to do a power cycle instead of a warm reboot. There we go. We can see we're now on version 19. Storage-wise, So the two key areas are VMFS. So if you've got block storage, if you want VMFS 6, there is no nice easy right-click upgrade. You need to create a new VMFS 6 data store, and then so there's no direct upgrade path. What we need to do is we need to create a new VMFS 6 data store and then storage vMotion our workloads across there. And another question there from Pietro, does the golden rule upgrade VMware tools before virtual hardware still apply? Yes, it very much does. I wouldn't recommend doing VM compatibility without VMware tools. At least check that there's a version available. So yeah, then we storage vMotion, then we can decommission our old VMFS 5. There is a power CLI command that can help you with that as well. But then, yeah, get rid of that VMFS 5. If you're running vSAN, you'll see something a bit like this, where it warns you that there's a disk format version warning, which basically means there's a newer version of vSAN. So if we go onto the cluster, I think we are going to run over, aren't we? I will try to wrap up as quickly as possible, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to probably run over 5 minutes. We'll keep going. And in fact, I'm happy to keep going as long as needs be, but I do apologize for taking up any more of your time. So please do the pre-check when you're doing vSAN. Don't just click the upgrade button, no matter how tempting it is. Some vSAN upgrades will do rolling, they'll pull disks out, disk groups, things like that, format them, and then they go back in. Some are just a metadata version upgrade. This one involves the formatting. So it takes a few minutes to run through, dependent on the size of your vSAN cluster. But we can now see we're now running vSAN version 14. So the disks are running version 14. So that's that. Networking wise, there's often a new version of the vSphere distributed switch that ships with vSphere, and vSphere 7 update 2 is no exception. So here, I've got a funky way of doing, I forgot about that. It's really easy to do. We can see this switch is running VDS version 6.5. So it's not the latest version. We get the warning here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a backup of the config, because if something goes wrong, we need that config in order to restore it. There is no downgrade VDS. So we take that backup, give it some description so it makes sense, and we'll see that appear down in the bottom left. There's our backup file. So now we can recover if there's a problem. Next thing to do is we're just going to go upgrade distributed switch, select the version that we want based on the feature sets that we need. So there's LSCP fast mode in 7 update 2. Hit next. It'll check that the hosts are compatible. If your hosts are not all running vSphere 7 update 2, then you will get some problems flagged up there. But that's it. That's all there is to it. So that's nice and easy. And on that note, our upgrade is technically complete. There's a lot more content that we could have covered there. We could have done a lot of stuff. And have I frozen in Zoom as my camera played? Let me just reset my camera again. I appear not to have fixed the thermal issue that I had there last time. Let's try that again. Yeah, so our upgrade is complete. And we can crack on with our questions. So, wow, with 1 minute to go, as I say, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press on for a few more minutes. Let's see what we can cover in here. So how to upgrade to ESXi 5.5 to 7 without disturbing virtual machines. You will have to do a staggered upgrade. So that upgrade will go from 5.5 probably to from 5.5 to 6 to 6.7 to 7. There's a lot of stuff, but check the interoperability matrices for that. Anything else? Does the distributed switch upgrade cause an outage? The answer to that is it shouldn't. There is a knowledge base article. If you're going specifically to a version 6.6 VDS, you might want to have a look at that because there were some potential issues there. But I've never seen a VDS upgrade cause problems. Version 7 has VMFS 6.2 or is an update needed. So vSphere 7 has full support for VMFS 6. There's no problem there. You can absolutely use that. By default, your older storage is probably going to be running VMFS 5 unless you've already done that upgrade. If it's brand new storage that you're deploying, then you will be using VMFS 6 typically there. Will there be a recording of this demo? Yes, there will be a recording. We'll be sending that out in the next couple of days. And how does Runecast help in VMware upgrades? So probably the two key areas are the kind of health check areas, so making sure your environment is healthy. And then beyond that, there's the hardware compatibility list checking as well. I could talk about that topic itself for hours on end as it is. And is it possible to install Lifecycle Manager on 6.5 Update 3? It is not. Lifecycle Manager is a construct that exists from vSphere 7 general availability and above. So I think I've answered all of those questions, which is amazing. I kind of need to take a breath now. So we're actually only 1 minute over, which is I'm amazed with. So I'm sorry if my camera decided to play up halfway through. I didn't spot it until a little bit late, it would appear. But hopefully this has been useful to you. Some of the stuff that we can do from a Runecast perspective, we're looking to help you save time, reduce outages, improve security, minimize risk, and also reduce your costs. So if you'd like to learn more about Runecast Analyzer, and I know I've talked very, very little about it today, if you'd like to learn a bit more, please visit us at runecast.com. You can get a 14-day trial, just download it, deploy it in your lab or wherever. You'll learn a lot of stuff there. If you want to learn a little bit more, please feel free to reach us at innovate@runecast.com. We can set up a deep dive session so we can go into all of the functionality. And finally, thank you for attending. You can get us on Twitter as @Runecast, or if you want to get me directly, if you've got any questions about any of this, if you want specific video clips or anything like that, please message me. My DMs are open. I'm @Kev_Johnson. On that note, I am going to, unfortunately, the advanced copy of the recording is going to be difficult because it has to run through post, but it will be coming out in the very, very near future. But yeah, thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate the time that you've given us. I'm sorry I've run over by a couple of minutes, but hopefully that has been super useful to you. Thanks for attending. I hope to see you again soon.